This episode of Deadheads contains colorful language. If you have kids in the room, you might want to turn the volume up. Okay, let the fun begin. Okay, so restaurants, alcohol, health insurance. Holy shit. Oh my God. This number is giving me a lot of anxiety.
What's the damage?
I made $7,892 and I somehow spent $10,869 in 1 month in June. So
how many months do you think you've done that?
I don't know. How many months are in 33 years? This is the conversation that changed my life. It's the first time I revealed a deep, dark secret to my best friend. It was a conversation 10 years in the making. And it started like most things start in my life, on a walk.
Where are we heading? Do you want to go to the library?
I would love to go to the library.
I have a few books to pick up.
Okay. My friend Rachel and I walk all over Brooklyn.
Usually our destination's a park or a library.
Or a grocery store.
I love a grocery store.
We love a grocery store.
This is a path we've walked, I would say, maybe 100 times before.
No. Oh God, is that a rat? Oh. Generally like to do all the boring stuff together.
It's way more fun.
Because we talk the whole time while we're together.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about literally everything, but there was that one thing that I guess I never told you.
It was a big one. I think it was right up here. I remember because it was like right by this gate. We were almost home. And we'd been talking for like 2 hours. And then suddenly you're like,
What I did and did not want to tell Rachel that day was that I had $14,000 of credit card debt. And that I'd been maintaining that level of debt in secret for years. $14,000 worth of free-floating anxiety, $14,000 worth of sleepless nights, $14,000 worth of denial. Denial that was so entrenched, it kept me from opening my credit card statements or making anything but the minimum auto payments. It was so deep that it was actually more than $14,000. After talking with Rachel that day, I opened all my accounts and realized the debt was more like $18,000. The denial was so bad that I didn't even realize how much debt I had.
It wasn't surprising that Jamie was in debt. That's something I could totally relate to, because I've been there plenty of times. It's just that she and I both have these big fucking mouths. So I was like, how did you keep that secret for so long?
It's true. Our instinct to confess is kind of like a compulsion.
Jamie's made a career for herself being loud on the internet. She talks about her family.
I'll start by saying that I'm an only child and an only grandchild in a very small family.
And all the shitty dates she's been on.
I'm probably just going to delete my Bumble and all my dating apps and probably just go live somewhere very far away from all men.
She's definitely always talked about mental health.
I want to know if anyone else is feeling extremely anxious like me.
Jamie's so candid in her documentation of her life that I admit to occasionally feeling jealous because she'll have shared something deeply personal with me and we've worked it out together.
This is the story about how I tried to heal my grandmother's chronic back pain with medical marijuana and ended up putting her in the hospital.
And then the very next day, my mom calls and says, hey, did you see what Jamie posted on her Instagram story? And it's the very same personal topic we just discussed.
Okay, but I always tell you first.
It's true. Of course, bravery does have its limits, and even the most audacious among us keeps secrets from our friends. Debt, and basically everything about money, makes even the most confident-seeming people squirm. Why do you think that was the day that you told me?
You just hit a point where the dread rises up so far that it just completely overwhelms you. That and the fact that I had been laid off a few months prior, and there was just no way of keeping myself afloat or pretending to be afloat anymore. Now there was suddenly just no money coming in. There was no way to avoid it any longer.
Yeah. The truth is nobody really knows what's going on with other people's financial lives. That's because we don't talk about it. We think that if we keep our fears and embarrassments secret, we'll be safer.
And keeping my secret did make me feel safer because it gave me a false sense of control. But I was actually spinning out of control, and keeping it all to myself was beginning to make me unsafe.
Why am I telling you this? In order for me to be held accountable, I'm going to need you to come with me on this journey. The goal that I've set for myself is getting out of my credit card debt. And if and when I'm able to do that, I'm going to get a cat.
So when Jamie told me, and then she told the hundreds of millions of people on TikTok, something shifted. After 10 years of cultivating a secret in the dark, suddenly she turned on the light.
I'm starting with about $18,000 in credit card debt, which is so much, and I've never really told anyone that. So now we have a secret. Don't tell anyone or tell everybody. I look forward, and also I don't look forward to doing this.
And it was then that she could see not only herself, but just how many people had been hiding in the shadows with her. And that's where the story really begins.
Welcome to Deadheads.
Welcome.
Deadheads is an investigation into the American economy.
From the perspective of people in debt.
Like us.
Like everybody.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm Rachel.
And we named this podcast after ourselves.
Because we know firsthand what it's like to lose sleep over debt.
To live in denial over debt.
To get out of debt, but find ourselves falling back into it.
But most importantly, to start questioning why and how
America became a country full of deadheads.
You wussies! You unbelievable little children people! Unbelievable!
When I started to seek out personal finance guidance, this was the first voice I heard. Dave Ramsey, one of the most recognizable and best-selling authors in the space.
You work all the time when you're broke. It's what you do. It's how you not be broke anymore.
And his take on financial advice is steeped in the theory that every individual is solely responsible for their financial well-being.
You little wussy, you go to work!
It's a theory that says we are in total control of our successes and failures.
And it pays little credence to the environmental, structural, or collective factors at play.
That's how you fix this. You don't go out to eat. And you don't go on vacation. You're broke.
And while I find Dave Ramsey's tone particularly off-putting,
his take on advice is pretty popular. He sells a lot of books and has a lot of listeners on his podcast.
And you don't have to look too hard to find other financial influencers who have adopted his style.
You have to stop making excuses. It's your fault that you're broke.
And are successfully spouting the same philosophies.
If you have poor money management, you really can't blame anybody except yourself.
And perhaps this advice is so satisfying because it is so simple. It's got a clear bad guy, you.
How have you had enough time to be as stupid as this pile of debt suggests?
And it's got a clear solution. Stop being a stupid, idiot child person.
Guys, let me just tell you, it's a simple freaking formula.
It's a simple freaking formula, damn it.
Yeah, dummy. Don't spend more money than you make. It's just math. Actually, you know what? This podcast is over. That's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Forget it.
What was I thinking? There's nothing else to say.
That was so easy. What should we do now?
Let's go get a cocktail.
Why don't we go grocery shopping?
Okay, perfect. Just kidding. I think there's more to the story.
I thought so too, but I was too embarrassed to ask.
You and everyone else, because we all seem to think that everyone else just knows personal finance by osmosis from just like living in the world. But we don't know.
And we don't know what we don't know.
And just like a part-time Orange Julius employee who protects her virginity as carefully as her summer wages and then gets stuck in the middle of a tea party of friends sharing salacious stories of their summer camp sexcapades, we're too embarrassed to admit what we don't know.
Now it's just about finances, not fellatio.
But women need to be talking about finances more than any of the other sometimes hard things in life because women have a particularly fraught relationship with money.
They earn less than men, they have more responsibilities in the home than men, and they experience more financial stress than men.
So over the last year, we interviewed women from across the country to better understand their experiences with debt and money.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I'm from Temecula, California.
I'm Nikki. I live in Columbus, Ohio.
My name is May. I was born in South Korea.
I'm Sam. I'm from Indiana.
I'm Joanna. I live in Los Angeles, California.
I'm Sarah. I'm from Florida. I have been struggling with credit card debt for 8 years.
At my worst, I had about $36,000 of credit card debt for about 10 years.
I have $250,000 of student loan debt.
I've been in debt since I graduated high school and started college.
Being able to function in America is contingent on debt, and specifically in my experience, credit card debt.
And after we began speaking with these women, we started to notice many similarities in their experiences. One of the most astounding patterns is that they all thought that they were the only ones in debt.
I never thought anybody was in credit card debt like me.
I was like, I'm the only girl in the world that has ever struggled with debt.
And without fail, they all had the same story about money, which is that they didn't know anything about it.
There isn't like a class in high school that you can sign up for. I paid for my own education. I took out student loans, but I didn't know how to manage money by any means. I just was like, great, money.
I never understood finances. I've spent so much time trying to inform myself because I didn't grow up with it.
Debt and your salary are two things that people don't talk about that maybe they should.
And because I did not trust my parents financially, my brother and I were just kind of left to fend for ourselves for financial education.
For American millennials in the public school system, personal finance classes were few and far between. Of course, even if they had been more ubiquitous, it probably would have sounded something like this scene from Ferris Bueller.
Anyone? The Great Depression. Anyone?
But now that I'm an adult, I do wish I'd been given a chance to at least sleep through one of these classes.
Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects?
Because studies show that exposure to this type of education leads to higher credit scores and lower credit card debt.
In the last few years, personal finance courses have become slightly more common in American public high schools.
But unless I Josie Grossie my way into one of those classrooms never been kissed style, this form routine is shit out of luck.
And whether or not we're taught personal finance skills at school,
or like me by Regis Philbin on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire,
that doesn't change the fact that in general, we don't like to talk about money in our culture.
As far back as 1922, Emily Post, an American author and socialite, wrote the gold standard for what's right and wrong in American manners.
Entitled simply Etiquette, this bestseller had one very simple rule when it came to talk about money.
Should I do it with a funny voice?
Of course.
A very well-bred man intensely dislikes the mention of money and never speaks of it if he can avoid it.
Perfect. 100 years later, etiquette books are obsolete. Americans comport themselves with manners that would have Emily rolling in her Tuxedo Park grave.
And yet the well-bred, white bread and wheat bread loving among us still intensely dislike the mention of money and never speak of it.
Unless, of course, we're on national television fighting to the death to win some.
And we have a lot of shame about money.
Nearly half of Americans admit to lying or misrepresenting information about their finances to their intimate partners.
And that number is even higher among young people. For millennials, it's 54%, and for Gen Z, it's 64%.
We're not learning about money.
We're certainly not talking about money.
And unless we spend our after-school hours on the floor of the self-help aisle at Borders,
we end up learning everything about money from the people around us.
So, to get a better understanding of Jamie's financial education, we turned to the one person we thought would know best, her mom.
Hello.
Hi, lady.
Hi, lady.
Hi, welcome
Hi.
to my mess.
You look cute.
Oh, thanks.
My mom is a very colorful person. For starters, she's got bright red hair and has a bag of yarn attached to her hip at all times, which she uses to crochet something brightly colored for just about everyone she meets, including complete strangers.
Sam's apartment is as bright and inviting as she is.
Packed to the ceiling with all the kind of stuff she likes.
Like a lot of plants.
So many plants.
How many plants are in this plant corner?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Seriously, I've counted them. 96, 97, 98, 99, 100.
What's this one back here?
And I also didn't count these hanging ones.
I don't think you got that one.
The apartment also has its own soundtrack, mainly consisting of theme songs from Nick at Night.
Which ones?
Oh, God. It was always either Bewitched or Mary Tyler Moore or...
What do you mean tell her? You didn't tell me to tell her.
Yeah, The Love Boat.
Soon we'll be making another run.
Growing up, I talked to my mom about everything. She was the kind of parent who was also a friend, so there was basically nothing off limits. But I had never brought up money with her.
Really?
Yeah, it was just you and the whole internet. Not her.
Hi, I'm Samantha.
Hi, I'm Jamie. That's Samantha.
I'm Samantha. That's Jamie.
Okay, what was your reaction when you saw the first thing that you saw I posted about my money situation? What was your reaction?
I kind of saw myself. I didn't panic because I didn't think that it would be a big deal. You were independent. You were didn't have anyone to support. You were you were living your life. That's what I did in my 20s. I mean, every penny that I made, I bought clothes. Every penny. Whatever I had, whatever I made, I never saved anything. I always spent it. Always. I was always a spender.
I was like my mom. We both had a habit of blowing through our money. Although for me, it was less about clothes and more about paying an obscene amount of money to live in a shitty slice of heaven in the East Village. This type of spending often meant that we were living beyond our means. Neither of us ever learned how to be good with money. When I think back to my childhood, the only thing I remember knowing about money was that there never seemed to be enough of it.
And so you never talked to your mom about money?
No, my parents did not know how to manage money. My father was a big show-off. My mother was a fashionista. Till this day, she's still a fashionista. And I never really had any financial education.
Did you have any thoughts about my financial education or what my relationship with money might look like?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Our relationship with money is personal. It's as unique as the families we come from. But the cruel reality is, if you come from a family that experienced poverty, you're far more likely to struggle financially as an adult.
Something that our family's still contending with is the fact that my parents have historically been bad with money, as they say.
During my high school and college years, my family fell into homelessness 2 times. Like, my parents were in survival mode.
We lived in a very financially unstable household where income was not always constant. The reality was bills were being paid late.
We were paycheck to paycheck, and hopefully that paycheck came in.
I grew up in a family that couldn't afford anything, and then I tried to get better at that myself and ended up being affected by the same systems that kept my family in poverty or below poverty level.
And so getting into the conversation about money, even now, there's a lot of shame that comes around talking about finances with my family.
It gives you a very anxious attachment to money. And so it was always like, well, while you have it, take advantage of it. It really wasn't a healthy mindset in that regard, which was tough.
If you could describe our money situation, our financial situation when I was growing up in one word, how would you describe it?
Stressful. Very. There was not regular money flowing in. So it was very stressful and very, chaotic at times because I didn't know how we would manage.
And so was that something you were constantly thinking about?
Constantly, because I didn't want to have to go live somewhere else or move or think about not being on my own and independent. Certainly wasn't going to live with my mother again. So.
My mom was 23 when she moved in with my dad and 28 when she had me. She rushed into adulthood to get away from her own family. She made a lot of emotional decisions that had financial implications for both her life and mine.
We lived in our 1-bedroom apartment from 1983 till 1996. When we moved to this apartment, it was double our rent, and I freaked out. And we did it for a while, we did. Then all the shit started happening, and then we weren't able to do it.
Yeah, I don't have really good memories from this apartment.
What do you remember about this apartment?
I have memories of a lot of fighting, a lot of conflict for a lot of different reasons, but I feel like often they had to do with money and bills.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fighting in my house growing up, and to my 6-year-old ears, it always sounded like it was about money. But as I got a little older, I realized that the money part was just one piece of a much larger issue. My dad struggled with addiction. He wasn't always able to hold a job. Most of the time, it was chaos. Sometimes I didn't know what I was going to find on the other side of the door. And I often fell asleep to the sounds of my mom screaming about something that I couldn't understand. All I knew was that she was angry. And I hated that about her.
Okay, so tell me what the numbers are.
Okay, on restaurants I spent $516. Clothing I spent $649.29 because I bought those 2 bathing suits. I bought those 2 bathing suits.
2 bathing suits that were each $300.
Yes. Yes. Bathing suits are really difficult to find, and I found one that I felt really good in, and I bought 2, one black one and one navy one.
Okay, have you worn them yet?
No.
Okay, so let's start by returning those.
I returned 1.
For over 10 years, I was engaged in a particularly modern form of cognitive dissonance. I was spending wildly without intention as to what I was buying or why. I simply could not wrap my mind around the fact that there might be another way to exist. Most experts will tell you that the first step to getting your finances under control is to make a budget. And they're not wrong, it works. The math is easy, and it's a really helpful tool. But I wasn't able to budget until my friend literally sat me down in a chair for several hours and held my hand while I did it, because those numbers were really fucking painful to look at.
You cannot go to this wedding.
I have to go to this wedding.
No, you don't.
Already.
Did you book the tickets? No, she's not. You're going to call her, you're going to tell her what's going on, and you're going to say, I can't come to your wedding, and I really hope that I can celebrate with you in another context at some other time. That doesn't require me to fly across the country, buy a dress, get a hotel and a car service and everything and a gift.
What Rachel made me realize is that I'd been operating out of a place of obligation. I was putting everyone else's needs before my own. Once I started aligning my money with my values more closely, budgeting felt not only possible, but maybe even kind of fun and exciting. I felt like I'd cracked the code, and now, obviously, I needed to tell everyone else.
Good morning. I'm Jamie. I live in Brooklyn, and I'm working to tackle $18,000 of credit card debt. I drove my friends to the airport, so I've been up since 6.
Over the years, I'd cultivated a modest following from my work as a journalist, covering things like fashion, beauty, and lifestyle, all things I coincidentally spent way too much money on. So that didn't really feel like the right audience to talk to about having no money.
To you guys briefly about debt management plans versus paying off a credit card.
Joining TikTok felt like the Wild West, where no one knew anything about me or anything I'd ever done before. What is this place? I don't see anybody I know. Just one tumbleweed and the sounds of crop-top teens dancing in the glow of their ring lights behind the saloon door. This would be the perfect place to start a video journal chronicling my journey out of debt. Who in their right mind would watch a 30-something-year-old drone on about credit cards? So I hit publish and sent my very first message into the void. But wait, it's not a void. It's a 21st century social media platform with over 1 billion users. And even though I'd come across plenty of trolls in my time on the internet, once I started talking about money, they suddenly had a lot more to say.
Should we read some of these?
We get someone else to read them.
Here to read the best of the worst comments from Jamie's TikTok is our third grade friend, Dottie Mae Mershon.
Yikes! I'm glad you're in debt. You deserve it. You're delusional. You're tricking yourself and being rude to others. Girl, those nails look so bad. How do you live this way? Geez, what a child.
Where have we heard that before?
You wussies! You unbelievable little children people! Unbelievable!
So here I am, stepping into my truth, bearing my insecurities, facing my past. I'm just beginning my unlearning of how I was taught and not taught about the concept of money and debt and choices and responsibility. And as I take a step toward healing the problem, this is the messaging I get.
Shame on you.
Actually, it was even more unhinged than that.
You're not pretty enough to be in credit card debt.
People are angry with people like me.
This makes me so angry.
And they want me to know it.
You should be in jail.
Thanks, Dottie.
I came here to connect, but these voices reminded me that our culture understands financial failure as moral failure, that so much of the language around financial advice is infused with puritanical philosophies and methods. I started to hear the language everywhere, like this sentiment from personal finance columnist Michelle Singletary. After sharing a handful of tips and tricks for getting out of debt, she said something I've struggled to forget, that I should be suffering.
I want you to suffer while you're getting out of debt, because it is through that suffering that you learn your lesson.
I remember hearing that and thinking, don't they realize that suffering is what got me here in the first place?
A lot of people don't talk about the depression debt pipeline, but it was a really, really deep one for me. And so I haven't told any of my high school friends that I'm in credit card debt. I haven't said anything because I know the judgment that's going to come to it. It's not even around my shame. It's around their judgment. And I don't want to think Part of me doesn't want to think that my friends are actually like this. That's a huge part of it. And then another part of it is that I don't want to deal with the judgment that comes with it because I'm judging myself harshly enough already.
I didn't tell anyone anything about my debt for over a decade because I was so deeply ashamed and convinced that I was the only one. I not only believed that I alone had failed, I believed that this failure made me a bad person. I remember the day I told you about my debt, I was terrified that when you found out you were going to think differently of me, like that you were going to realize that I'd been lying to you about something terrible this whole time.
Yeah, it's really upsetting to hear. And because you didn't tell me any of that stuff, I wouldn't have brought up the fact that I'd also been in debt in the past and I could have helped you.
Yeah, which is really the worst part of it all.
Just like in any other form of shame, the isolation is really deadly. It could be really dangerous. Why do we insist on suffering? On judging ourselves for these perceived failures? Does feeling ashamed even help us?
There's plenty of evidence. Shaming actually doesn't help. It's like somebody's got a problem, and shaming them makes their problem worse.
That's Kathy O'Neill, a data scientist who studies the way shame is used as a tool for profit. And she says not only does shame not help, it hurts. It's called a toxic feedback loop.
It often leads to one of two kinds of behavior, especially with respect to debt. And one of them is where people they don't want their friends and family to see their problems. So they avoid talking about money. They avoid thinking about money. They make their problems worse in a very direct sense because it's just too shameful for them to handle.
You do something you're ashamed of. You feel ashamed about it. Hide from your shame. And as a result, you're driven to do that very same thing again.
That is a direct consequence of making it that way. Making it shameful. Another response is when people sort of pretend it's not true. And so they overspend and they treat people to stuff and they do things to compensate. It's like a compensation type of behavior.
For me, it was kind of like I always knew I was going to be behind my peers. It was not like my parents ever saved anything for a wedding or for a house or anything like that. And so sometimes out of frustration, knowing I couldn't control that aspect, I would just try and replicate my peers' lives in other ways. But that wasn't productive, and that was actually going to take me further back, and I just didn't realize it at the time.
So shame only works with respect to norms. You should be following the rules. And if you're not following the rules, then shame on you. The research I've done is sort of to investigate when is telling someone to follow the rules punching down? Like when is it actually an unreasonable demand? And for the most part, that's around the question of choice. Does anybody choose to get old? Does anybody choose to be in debt? Does anybody choose to be addicted to opioids? Like the answer is no. Nobody chooses those things. I'm not saying there's zero control over any of that at all. I'm saying that nobody would actually choose that stuff. And yet we have an intense amount of shame around those topics. We have an intense amount of perceived morality around those topics.
Okay, sure, I shouldn't have been dropping $100 at group dinners or trying to keep up with all the latest fashion trends. Those were choices. But I didn't choose to attend $100 group dinners because I'm obsessed with overpaying for mediocre food. I went to social events and bought clothes to fit in because it's culturally expected to stay part of the group.
And when following the rules relies on our singular willpower to be responsible when everything around us tests that willpower at every turn, following the rules doesn't feel like a reasonable choice.
We have to say, do those rules make sense? Can people actually follow them? Versus, is this just something that's convenient for other people to police because it makes them feel separated from the problem?
I was silent for so many years in an attempt to separate myself from my problems, but that wasn't helping. What I needed was more connection, or a different kind of connection, to be part of the group in a meaningful way.
But that starts with honesty, not willpower. And you did have a model for that in an apartment building in Queens.
I love this apartment. The only thing I don't love about this apartment is the train. Right there.
What do you love about this apartment?
It's just me. It's just everything about it is me. I think it's very cozy. I think it's very homey. I think it's very inviting. I know there's a lot of shit everywhere, but...
Did you ever feel like there were bad memories here? Like, did you ever not feel this way about this apartment?
Initially, when the furniture that was here when we lived here together was here.
When I was 11 years old, my father lost his battle with addiction in this apartment. And it was such a chaotic time that I never worked through all the ways I felt betrayed. Perhaps the hardest part to grapple with was understanding that in many ways, my mom felt relief when he died. That him dying was going to make her life easier. All these years later, my mom has turned this apartment into her favorite place in the world. But for me, it's the place where I had the worst day of my life. And it's always felt impossible for me to reconcile how those two things can be true at once. But that wasn't the whole story.
It was scary, but a relief, in a way. Because I know you've heard me say this many times, like I never knew what I would walk into when I would come home behind that door. It was always something, just not good. Just something always was happening. Something was always stressful, critical, drama. I just never knew what the situation would be here behind that door. And I felt very guilty saying that this is the best thing that could have happened to me. But truthfully, it was because I just was able to take care of you and take care of myself. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it before.
Why not?
Because I couldn't go to work because I didn't trust anyone to watch you. I couldn't leave you with Dad because I was afraid. And I just didn't want to do it. I just felt like I would somehow make it through and not worry about what's happening to you because that was more important. So, yeah.
It's hard to hear that because, in some ways I feel like there's a part of me that has felt like angry at you for feeling that way, that it was a relief to you. But I'm not thinking about the way it was a relief to you because of me.
For so many years, I blamed my mom's anger on everything that happened. But she was angry because she couldn't pay the bills. She couldn't leave a child alone in the house. She couldn't get a job and leave me, so she couldn't pay for a family on her own. She didn't have anywhere to go. This was an economic problem as much as it was anything else. And it's the story of so many people in America, especially women, especially mothers. Our freedoms are dictated by our economic stability. And my mom, like so many other moms, had to learn these lessons the hard way, but managed to keep our world spinning by building healthy communities. Over the years, she's cultivated a chosen family of women who have been there for each other in all kinds of ways, whether it's one of their Friday night cocktail parties or banding together in times of crisis. Like in the days following my dad's death, when a constant stream of people were coming in and out of our house to pay their respects.
I'll tell you what I remember immediately once he died. My first instinct was, how am I going to manage? I remember people were coming to pay Shiva calls, and I was totally distracted by thinking to myself, how the fuck am I going to pay my rent? I was already 3 months behind in my rent when he died. And I just didn't know what I was going to do until all these friends came in and said, we got it. We got you. And they paid my back rent for 3 months. So I had a clean slate. And I was never in that kind of debt again. Ever. I never got a credit card debt. I paid my credit card bills. I charged very little. Whatever I could afford to pay is what I did. I always made sure to pay my rent. That was, till this day, first thing I do is pay my rent. Because I never, ever want to consider the fact that I won't have a place to live.
My mom sees her apartment as the place where she grew into the person and mother she wanted to be. And that person learned that financial freedom is not about doing everything on your own. It's about connecting and leaning on your community.
Are you inspired by Jamie's?
Yes. Totally. Yep.
Do you feel like she's educated you?
Yes. Totally. Although, for me, it takes me a while to get into that budgeting thing. I've been saying it since you started talking about it. I'm a big procrastinator when it comes to doing certain things. Tell me you want to go to TJ Maxx? I have my shoes on. I'm going. Right?
So maybe my mom didn't pass along the most practical financial wisdom. I didn't learn about credit cards or 401ks. But why do we consider that to be the only valuable financial advice based on one set of financial values? And is that advice even working? After I sifted through the gaggle of trolls under the TikTok bridge, I found that their voices, while loud and angry, were nothing compared to the many people who saw themselves in what I had to say.
Within a few months, there were tens of thousands of people following Jamie's journey. She even started to get news coverage.
Jamie Feldman was once $20,000 in debt.
I have $13,000 of credit card debt currently.
And for Jamie Feldman, that's actually an improvement.
That's why this week we're chatting with Jamie Feldman.
Feldman says she's going to keep budgeting, bargain shopping, and putting cash into envelopes until her debt is all paid off.
She kept getting stopped on the street by people who recognized her, mostly young women. Remember that one lady who made a beeline for you?
Oh God, of course. How could I forget? It was my Taylor Swift moment.
She dropped her bags and left her friends and just ran up to you and was like, I love you. To be fair, I'm pretty sure she was drunk.
She was really drunk, but still. The message was clear. People do want to talk about debt. They just needed someone to talk about it in a different way than from what we usually hear.
As we kick off 2024, many of us are looking to get our financial houses in order.
Every year, the same news outlets run the exact same segments telling you how to fix your financial problems.
I think a lot of people wake up New Year's morning like this, looking at their bills from Christmas, and you want to sort of dig yourself out of debt. What's the best way to get started?
They're more or less the same script.
Now's the time when those bills from the holidays start rolling in, and sometimes they can throw you off budget.
And they always march out some expert.
Yeah, her tools and tips to fortify our funds are all in her new book.
Usually somebody who's struck it rich by being smart with money.
This budgeting method will change your life.
Of course, they've made it even more money selling you a book or 8 about how you too can be smart with money. But if this was such easy advice, then it wouldn't be a problem that only gets worse every year.
80% of American families carry consumer debt.
And 50% rely on credit cards just to get by.
A quarter of us have student loan debt.
Half of us has medical debt.
And all of us are more pessimistic than ever about being able to pay it off.
The predominant narrative about personal finance in our culture, the one that's reinforced by those experts on daytime television, is that we are failing. That being in debt is an anomaly. People in debt are the exception to the rule.
But we think we need a new narrative that asks a different question. It's not who is failing at the system, but who is the system failing?
Because the fact is, we are not an anomaly. We're not the exception to the rule. We are the rule.
What do you get when you burn through your plastic stacks? A mouthful of honey ain't it funny now you're scratching for cash.
Thanks for listening to Debtheads.
The rest of this 5-part season is coming out starting on tax day, so it's probably already in your calendar.
How convenient.
While you wait, you can find bonus Deadhead subscriber content on our Patreon, get updates on the Deadhead Substack, follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Deadheads Podcast, and I don't know, come over for dinner on Friday?
Yeah.
Seriously.
This project is made possible in part from a grant by the Elevate Creatives Fund. Deadheads is written, produced, and edited by us, Jamie Feldman and Rachel Webster. Our theme song is Pay for That Money by the Defibrillators. Original music is composed by Helnwein. Serena Chow fact-checked this episode, and it was mixed by Seelye. Thanks to every woman who shared her debt story with us. You can learn more about how shame is used for profit by picking up Kathy O'Neill's book, The Shame Machine. Special thanks to Dottie Mae Mershon and her momager, Jessie Arrington, for making internet trolls sound adorable. And thanks to our family, especially Samantha Feldman for her endless support, and Moss Levinson for his creative guidance, moral support, and for keeping the motherfucking lights on.
You gotta pay for that money, boy.
Bye.